A number was once illegal. Not dangerous weapons, not heresy, not contraband, a number. The number 0 was banned in medieval Europe, and the story of why reveals something wild about how humans fear what they do not understand. The word Europe itself carries that same strange history of borrowed ideas and buried origins. To understand why 0 was treated like witchcraft, you have to understand the world that coined the word Europe in the first place. Around 522 BCE or earlier, the Homeric hymn to Apollo uses the word Europe as a geographic name, one of the earliest recorded uses we have. At that point, Europe was not a continent with a unified identity. It was a loose geographic idea, a name borrowed from Greek mythology and applied to land masses the ancient Greeks were still figuring out. The Greek word Europe, spelled Europe, was itself already old and contested. Scholars linked it to a Phoenician princess named Europa, who appears in Greek mythology. Others trace the word to the Greek roots eurys, meaning wide, and ops, meaning face or eye, from the ancient Proto-Indo-European root meaning to see. So Europe may have literally meant wide face or broad gaze. That name traveled from Greek into Latin as Europa, then eventually into Old French and French, landing in English around the year 1600 as the word we recognize today. A continent named after a mythological princess, or possibly just a description of geography. Nobody is entirely sure. And that uncertainty, that blurry origin, sets the tone perfectly for everything that followed inside Europe's borders. Origin story. 3 minutes. Now here's where things get genuinely fascinating. While the word Europe was settling into Latin and Greek texts, a mathematical concept was being born thousands of miles away that Europe would spend centuries refusing to acknowledge. In 628 CE, an Indian mathematician named Brahmagupta wrote a text called the Brahmasphutta Siddhanta, the correctly established doctrine of Brahma. In it, he did something no one had done before in a formal systematic way. He defined 0, not just as an absence, not just as a placeholder, but as an actual number with its own rules. He wrote about adding 0, subtracting 0, multiplying by 0. He was working through the arithmetic of nothing. And he nailed most of it. This was a revolution. Before Brahmagupta, the world had placeholder symbols. The Babylonians had a marker that meant nothing in this column, but nobody had treated 0 as a number that could be operated on. Brahmagupta changed that. He gave nothing a definition. From India, this concept moved westward through the Islamic world. Arab mathematicians picked it up, refined it, and built algebra around it. The Arabic word for 0 was sifr, meaning empty or cipher. And this is the word that would eventually sneak into European languages, becoming 0 in Italian, 0 in English, carrying its Arabic heritage quietly in its syllables. By the time 0 reached Europe, it had traveled from India to Persia to the Arab world, collecting centuries of mathematical sophistication along the way. It arrived carrying the fingerprints of Islamic scholarship, which, in the context of medieval Christian Europe, was immediately suspicious. Enter medieval Venice. In 1299 CE, the city of Venice, one of the most commercially powerful cities in Europe at the time, officially banned the use of 0 and the Hindu Arabic numerals that came with it. Phoenician merchants were ordered to use Roman numerals instead. The reasoning was partly practical and partly paranoid. Roman numerals were familiar, official, and harder to forge, or so the authorities believed. The new Arabic symbols, including 0, were seen as easy to manipulate. A 0 could be turned into a 6 or a 9 with a quick pen stroke. Fraud was a real concern in commercial records. But the ban also had a deeper cultural edge. These were numbers that came from Arabic sources, and in 1299, Arabic meant foreign, non-Christian, and dangerously other. The Catholic Church viewed 0 with particular suspicion. Nothing, by definition, should not exist. God created everything, so what was this symbol for nothing doing in a Christian ledger? Some theologians argued 0 was linked to the void, to chaos, to forces that contradicted the divine order of creation. Here is the man caught in the middle of all this, Leonardo of Pisa, known to history as Fibonacci. Born around 1170 in Pisa, he had traveled extensively in North Africa with his father, who was a merchant. He studied under Arab mathematicians and came back to Italy convinced that the Hindu-Arabic number system, including 0, was vastly superior to Roman numerals. In the Tosavo II, he published the Liber Abaci, the Book of Calculation, which introduced Hindu-Arabic numerals to a European audience in a systematic way. Fibonacci showed how these numbers could simplify commerce, accounting, and mathematics. He was essentially saying, this is better, use this, and many merchants quietly agreed with him. But quietly is the key word. Even as the practical advantages of 0 became obvious to traders who had to calculate profits and losses, the official position remained hostile. Fibonacci's work did not immediately overturn centuries of suspicion. It planted a seed, but that seed took a very long time to grow. The Misconception. 90s. The most common version of this story you will hear is that the Catholic Church directly and formally banned zero as heresy, that there were inquisitions over arithmetic, that priests hunted down people writing zeros. That version is a dramatic exaggeration. The reality is more mundane and, honestly, more interesting. Venice's 1209 ban was a commercial regulation, not a religious decree. The Church's hostility to zero was more philosophical and cultural than it was legislative. The suspicion was real, but it was diffuse, spread across institutions, prejudices, and habits rather than concentrated in one dramatic papal bull against the number nothing. What actually happened is that zero took roughly 600 years to become fully accepted in European mathematics after Brahmagupta defined it in 628 CE. That acceptance was gradual, uneven, and largely driven by commerce rather than scholarship. Merchants who competed in international markets needed efficient calculation. Zero won not because Europe had a change of heart, but because zero worked, and money eventually talks louder than theology. Modern echoes. 90s. Zero is now, without exaggeration, the foundation of the modern world. Binary code, the language every computer on Earth speaks, is built entirely from ones and zeros. The system that Europe once called Arabic sorcery now runs banking, communications, medicine, and every video on this platform. The word sifr, which comes directly from that Arabic sifr meaning zero or empty, still lives in the English language. We use it to mean a secret code, or a person of no importance, someone who is essentially a zero. The cultural anxiety about nothingness lingered long enough to leave its mark on ordinary language. And the word zero itself, Italian in form, Arabic in ancestry, Indian in origin, is one of the clearest examples in everyday English of how knowledge moves across cultures, gets renamed, gets feared, gets adopted, and eventually becomes so ordinary that nobody thinks about where it came from. Deeper connections. Two mentors, the word Europe and the word zero, arrived in the English language by completely different routes, but they share something important. Both are words that Europeans borrowed from older foreign traditions and made their own. Europe comes from Greek Europei, which may connect to Phoenician sources through the myth of Europa, or may simply describe geography through eurys, wide, plus ops, eye, face. It traveled Greek to Latin to Old French to English, arriving around 1600. Zero traveled Sanskrit to Arabic sifr to Italian zero to English, carrying the mathematical legacy of Brahmagupta's 628 CE breakthrough through the